Welcome back to another journey through history. Tonight, we leave behind the crowded cities and quiet villages of the past and sail into a world ruled by wind, gunpowder, and uncertainty. The early 18th century was an age of empires. European powers competed for wealth, territory, and influence across the Atlantic Ocean. Merchant ships carried fortunes in cargo between continents. Naval vessels enforced imperial ambitions, and hidden among them sailed pirates. For a brief period known as the Golden Age of Piracy, certain individuals became so feared that their names alone could influence decisions across entire colonies. None became more famous than Blackbeard. With his dark beard, terrifying appearance, and carefully cultivated reputation, he transformed himself into a living legend. Sailors told stories about him in distant ports. Governors worried about his growing influence. Merchants feared encountering his ships on the open sea. Yet behind every legend stands a real person. Tonight we'll explore the life of Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. We'll examine how he rose to power, how he built one of the most feared reputations in maritime history, and how a determined effort to stop him eventually led to a dramatic battle off the coast of North Carolina. So relax, settle comfortably, and let the waves carry you into the age of pirates. Together, we'll follow Blackbeard's final voyage and the events that brought an end to his remarkable story. And before we begin, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. Every story, every memory, and every place matters. And together we keep history alive. Now let's begin. Part 1: The Golden Age of Piracy, Edward Teach before the legend. As the first light of dawn spreads across the Atlantic Ocean and the waves catch the soft glow of the rising sun, we begin our journey not with Blackbeard himself, but with the world that made him possible. Every famous historical figure emerges from a particular time and place, shaped by forces larger than any single individual. The story of Blackbeard cannot be understood without first understanding the era historians call the Golden Age of Piracy, a period that transformed ordinary sailors into legends and turned the waters of the Atlantic into one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. To modern eyes, piracy often appears wrapped in adventure and romance. Popular stories speak of buried treasure, exotic islands, and dramatic sea battles. The reality was more complex. Piracy emerged from political upheaval, economic opportunity, war, and the harsh realities of life at sea. It flourished because thousands of men found themselves living in a world where legal authority struggled to reach across vast oceans. In that environment, individuals willing to take extraordinary risks could sometimes acquire wealth, freedom, and influence beyond anything available through ordinary means. Imagine the Atlantic world during the late 17th century. European empires are expanding rapidly. The kingdoms of England, France, Spain, and the Netherlands compete fiercely for territory and trade. Merchant ships cross oceans carrying sugar, tobacco, silver, textiles, and countless other valuable goods. Colonies in the Americas grow increasingly important as sources of wealth. Every successful voyage represents profit. Every cargo creates opportunity. Yet these same trade routes also create temptation. Wherever valuable goods move regularly, people inevitably seek ways to seize them. The sea serves as both a highway and a frontier. Imagine sailing across the Atlantic in an era before steam engines, radios, or accurate weather forecasts. Ships depend entirely upon wind. Communication disappears beyond the horizon. Weeks or months may pass without contact with authorities. The ocean is vast enough to conceal both legitimate commerce and criminal activity. This reality creates conditions unlike those found on land. Governments possess power, but enforcing that power across thousands of miles of ocean proves difficult. One major factor contributing to piracy is war. Imagine Europe during the late 17th and early 18th centuries. Conflicts erupt frequently between rival nations. Naval vessels patrol contested waters. Privateers receive government authorization to attack enemy shipping. These privateers occupy a curious position between legality and piracy. They are not ordinary criminals. Instead, governments grant them permission to capture enemy vessels and claim portions of the resulting profits. Thousands of sailors gain experience through such activities. The problem arises when wars end. Imagine a privateer crew accustomed to earning wealth through maritime raids. Peace treaties suddenly remove legal justification for their activities. Governments reduce naval expenditures. Opportunities decline, yet the skills acquired during wartime remain. Sailors who once attacked enemy ships legally now face difficult choices. Some return to ordinary employment. Others discover that piracy offers familiar rewards without official authorization. Economic conditions also play an important role. Imagine life aboard a merchant ship during the early 18th century. Conditions are often harsh. Wages may be low. Discipline can be severe. Sailors work long hours under demanding circumstances. Many possess limited opportunities for advancement. Against this backdrop, piracy sometimes appears attractive. Pirate crews promise greater shares of captured wealth, more democratic decision-making, and escape from certain forms of authority. These promises are not always fulfilled, but they hold considerable appeal. The Caribbean becomes one of the most important centers of piracy. Imagine a region filled with islands, hidden coves, and busy shipping routes. Merchant vessels carrying valuable cargo pass regularly through narrow channels and coastal waters. Geography favors those familiar with local conditions. Pirates exploit this advantage by establishing bases, gathering intelligence, and targeting vulnerable ships. The environment supports both commerce and predation simultaneously. Popular images often portray pirates as chaotic criminals acting without organization. The reality is frequently more structured. Imagine pirate crews developing codes of conduct, distributing shares according to agreed rules, and electing certain leaders. While violence remains an important part of piracy, many pirate communities operate according to systems designed to maintain cooperation. These arrangements help explain why piracy attracts participants despite its dangers. The risks, however, are enormous. Imagine the consequences of capture. Governments view piracy as a serious threat to commerce and authority. Captured pirates often face trial and execution. Public hangings serve as warnings to others. Merchant vessels increasingly arm themselves. Naval patrols expand. Every successful pirate career unfolds beneath the constant shadow of eventual punishment. Within this environment, stories spread rapidly. Imagine sailors gathering in taverns across ports from London to Jamaica. Tales of daring raids, successful captures, and notorious captains circulate through maritime communities. Reputation becomes a valuable asset. A feared pirate may persuade merchant ships to surrender without fighting. Fear reduces resistance, preserving lives and resources. Successful pirates therefore understand the importance of image as well as action. The golden age of piracy produces several famous figures. Captains such as Henry Every, William Kidd, and Bartholomew Roberts gain notoriety through their exploits. Yet among all these names, one will eventually achieve a level of fame surpassing almost everyone else. That individual begins not as a legend, but as a man whose early life remains partly hidden by history. The future Blackbeard grows up within this world of expanding empires, maritime commerce, and growing opportunities for piracy. Imagine a young man observing ships entering and leaving colonial ports. Sailors bring stories from distant places. Wealth flows across oceans. Conflicts create both danger and opportunity. The sea offers possibilities unavailable to many people living ashore. What makes this period particularly important is the combination of factors occurring simultaneously. Trade expands. Empires compete. Wars create experienced seamen. Governments struggle to enforce authority across vast distances. Economic incentives encourage risk-taking. Geography provides hiding places. Together, these conditions create a unique historical moment in which piracy flourishes on an unprecedented scale. As the morning sun rises higher above the Atlantic and merchant ships continue their journeys across busy sea lanes, the stage is set for the emergence of one of history's most famous pirates. The world that will produce Blackbeard already exists. Trade routes are established. Opportunities are waiting. Legends are beginning to form. Soon we will meet the man himself. But before he becomes Blackbeard, before fear spreads at the mention of his name, before merchants alter routes to avoid him and governors organize efforts to stop him, he is simply Edward Teach, a young mariner living within a world shaped by wind, war, commerce, and the endless horizon of the Atlantic Ocean. As the morning continues and the Atlantic trade routes fill with ships carrying goods between continents, our attention turns toward the man who would eventually become known as Blackbeard. Surprisingly, despite his future fame, much of Edward Teach's early life remains uncertain. Historians possess fewer details about his childhood and youth than many people might expect. This absence of information is itself revealing. The future Blackbeard does not begin life as a nobleman, government official, or celebrated military leader. Instead, he emerges from the ordinary maritime world of the late 17th century, a world filled with sailors, merchants, dockworkers, and seafarers whose lives rarely attract extensive historical documentation. Like many figures associated with piracy, he enters the historical record gradually rather than dramatically. His transformation into a legend occurs over time. Imagine a busy colonial port during the closing decades of the 17th century. Ships crowd the harbor. Merchants negotiate contracts. Sailors unload cargoes from distant destinations. The smell of salt water mixes with wood, tar, and imported goods. Information travels through conversation as much as through official documents. Stories from across the Atlantic circulate constantly. Young men growing up in such environments encounter the sea not as an abstract concept but as a central feature of daily life. Many historians believe Edward Teach was born in England, possibly in the city of Bristol, one of the nation's most important maritime centers. Imagine growing up in a place where ships arrive from around the world. Foreign languages can be heard on the docks. Exotic goods appear regularly. Maritime professions offer opportunities for employment and advancement. The sea becomes both workplace and pathway to adventure. Whether Teach spent his youth in Bristol or elsewhere, he likely acquires maritime skills relatively early. Imagine a young sailor learning to handle ropes, adjust sails, and navigate changing weather conditions. Life at sea requires practical knowledge. Ships depend upon coordinated effort. Every crew member must understand responsibilities because mistakes can threaten the entire vessel. Such training develops discipline, adaptability, and confidence. The period coincides with major political and military conflicts affecting the Atlantic world. Imagine the opportunities created by wars between European powers. Naval vessels require crews. Merchant ships need protection. Privateering offers chances for profit. Many young sailors gain experience through these activities. Historians suspect that Teach may have served as a privateer before turning to piracy, though direct evidence remains limited. The possibility is significant because privateering provides valuable preparation for later careers at sea. Imagine participating in maritime warfare. Privateers pursue enemy vessels under government authorization. Success depends upon navigation, leadership, courage, and tactical skill. Capturing ships requires understanding how to approach, intimidate, and overwhelm opponents. These experiences teach lessons directly applicable to piracy. Many future pirates begin as privateers because the transition involves adapting familiar methods to different legal circumstances. The end of wars creates uncertainty for countless sailors. Imagine returning from successful privateering voyages only to discover reduced opportunities. Governments no longer require large numbers of armed seamen. Merchant employment remains available but often provides lower rewards. Economic pressures increase. Some individuals adapt successfully. Others begin considering alternatives that promise greater wealth despite greater risks. At this stage, Edward Teach remains largely invisible within historical records. Imagine him as one among thousands of experienced sailors moving through Atlantic ports. He possesses skills, knowledge, and ambition, but nothing yet distinguishes him dramatically from others. This ordinariness is important because it reminds us that legends often emerge from everyday beginnings. Historical fame rarely appears inevitable while events are unfolding. Maritime communities play a significant role in shaping opportunities. Imagine taverns near busy docks where sailors exchange information about shipping routes, valuable cargoes, and potential employers. Networks of relationships develop naturally among people who spend much of their lives moving between ports. News travels quickly. Opportunities circulate through conversation. Ambitious individuals learn where profits might be found. The Caribbean and surrounding regions become especially attractive during this period. Imagine islands scattered across warm blue waters, connected by shipping lanes carrying enormous wealth. Merchant vessels transport sugar, tobacco, silver, and other valuable goods. Geography creates numerous hiding places. Colonial authorities often possess limited resources. For those willing to challenge legal boundaries, opportunities appear abundant. One question historians frequently consider involves Teach's personality before he became famous. Imagine an intelligent and observant sailor learning from those around him. Successful pirate leaders require more than physical courage. They must understand human behavior. They must inspire loyalty among crews and fear among opponents. They must recognize opportunities and manage risks. Such abilities develop over time through experience rather than appearing suddenly. Perhaps the most important aspect of Teach's early years is the accumulation of maritime expertise. Imagine spending years aboard ships of different types, sailing through various conditions, and interacting with people from diverse backgrounds. Every voyage contributes knowledge. Every challenge teaches lessons. Navigation, leadership, combat, logistics, and communication all become increasingly familiar. By the time Teach enters the historical record more clearly, He possesses skills that will support his rapid rise. The Atlantic world of the early 18th century rewards individuals capable of adapting to changing circumstances. Imagine a sailor observing shifts in trade patterns, political alliances, and enforcement efforts. Success depends partly upon recognizing trends and responding effectively. Teach appears to possess this ability. When opportunities emerge, he proves ready to exploit them. What remains striking is how little contemporary observers could have predicted his future fame. Imagine encountering Edward Teach during these early years. He might appear competent, ambitious, and experienced, but so do many others. Nothing obvious announces that he will become one of history's most recognizable pirates. The transformation from ordinary sailor to Blackbeard has not yet occurred. Yet the foundations are already in place. He understands ships. He understands sailors. He understands the Atlantic world. Most importantly, he is living during a period uniquely suited to the rise of ambitious maritime outlaws. The golden age of piracy provides opportunities unavailable before or after. Those prepared to seize them can achieve extraordinary notoriety. As the day advances and ships continue crossing the Atlantic beneath favorable winds, Edward Teach stands on the threshold of a new chapter. Soon he will enter pirate circles. Soon he will begin building a reputation. Soon he will discover that fear can be as powerful as cannon fire. And before long, the name Edward Teach will fade into the background. The world will know him by another name. Part 2: Becoming Blackbeard, Building a Reputation of Fear. As the morning sun climbs higher above the Atlantic and merchant ships continue crossing the busy trade routes of the early 18th century, Edward Teach begins the transformation that will eventually make him one of the most feared and recognizable figures in maritime history. Few historical reputations have proven as durable as that of Blackbeard. More than 3 centuries after his death, his name remains instantly associated with piracy. Yet legends are not born fully formed. They are constructed gradually through actions, decisions, circumstances, and perhaps most importantly, perception. The man who became Blackbeard understood something that many of his contemporaries failed to appreciate. In the dangerous world of piracy, fear could be more valuable than violence. A pirate who terrified opponents into surrendering without a fight could acquire wealth while avoiding unnecessary casualties and damage. Reputation therefore became a weapon, and Blackbeard would wield that weapon with extraordinary skill. Imagine the Atlantic world during the years following the War of the Spanish Succession. Thousands of sailors search for opportunities. Trade continues expanding across the Caribbean and the American colonies. Merchant vessels carry valuable cargoes through waters increasingly frequented by pirates. Colonial authorities attempt to maintain order, yet enforcement remains inconsistent. This environment rewards individuals capable of combining maritime expertise with bold leadership. Edward Teach appears ready to do exactly that. Historical evidence suggests that Teach becomes associated with established pirate networks operating throughout the Caribbean. Imagine a young but experienced sailor entering circles where successful pirates share information, resources, and opportunities. These communities are not always formal organizations, yet connections matter. Knowledge of shipping routes, safe anchorages, and potential targets can determine success or failure. Teach learns from those already active in piracy while developing his own approach. One important figure during this period is Benjamin Hornigold, an experienced pirate who operates in the Bahamas and surrounding waters. Imagine Hornigold commanding vessels that prey upon merchant shipping while maintaining influence within pirate communities. Historical accounts indicate that Teach may have served under Hornigold before establishing independent command. If true, this experience would have provided valuable lessons regarding leadership, strategy, and the practical realities of piracy. Imagine life aboard a pirate vessel. Popular culture often portrays pirates as chaotic adventurers acting without structure or discipline. The reality is frequently more organized. Pirate crews depend upon cooperation because success requires coordinated action. Ships must be maintained. Navigation must be managed. Captured goods must be distributed. Conflicts among crew members must be resolved. Effective leaders understand these challenges and develop methods for addressing them. Teach appears to possess qualities that distinguish him from many others. Imagine a man combining physical presence with intelligence and confidence. Contemporary descriptions suggest that he is tall, imposing, and capable of commanding attention. Yet physical appearance alone does not explain his future success. Many sailors are strong or intimidating. Blackbeard's true talent lies in understanding how appearances influence behavior. The early 18th century is an age in which information travels primarily through personal accounts. Imagine sailors arriving in distant ports and sharing stories about encounters at sea. Merchants exchange warnings. Captains discuss dangers. News spreads through conversation as much as through written records. In such an environment, reputation becomes extremely powerful. A feared pirate may affect decisions made by people who have never seen him directly. Teach recognizes this reality and begins cultivating an image unlike any other. Imagine him standing on the deck of a pirate vessel before an engagement. Rather than presenting himself as an ordinary sailor, he transforms his appearance deliberately. Contemporary accounts describe him wearing dark clothing, carrying multiple pistols, and most famously, incorporating slow-burning fuses into his beard and hair. When lit, these fuses produce smoke that surrounds his face dramatically. The effect must have been startling. Picture a merchant crew encountering such a figure unexpectedly. The Atlantic horizon reveals an approaching vessel. As distance closes, details become visible. Armed pirates occupy the deck. At their center stands a tall man surrounded by drifting smoke, appearing almost supernatural through the haze. Fear begins working before a single shot is fired. Blackbeard understands that psychological advantage can determine outcomes. Importantly, evidence suggests that Blackbeard often prefers intimidation to excessive violence. Imagine a merchant captain faced with the choice of resistance or surrender. If surrender appears likely to preserve lives while resistance promises disaster, many captains choose cooperation. From Blackbeard's perspective, this result is ideal. Cargo can be seized efficiently. Damage remains limited. Risk decreases for everyone involved. Fear becomes a practical tool rather than an end in itself. Stories about Blackbeard spread rapidly. Imagine sailors describing encounters in taverns from Jamaica to Charleston. Each retelling emphasizes dramatic elements. His appearance grows more frightening. His exploits become larger. Some details are undoubtedly exaggerated, but exaggeration serves his interests. The stronger the reputation becomes, the less frequently he must rely upon force to achieve objectives. The development of reputation involves both reality and perception. Imagine two pirate captains with similar levels of success. One remains relatively unknown. The other becomes the subject of countless stories. Merchant crews encountering the famous captain may surrender more quickly because fear amplifies expectations. Blackbeard benefits enormously from this process. His name acquires power independent of specific actions. The Atlantic trade system inadvertently assists him. Imagine ships carrying not only goods but also information. News of pirate activity spreads across colonial networks. Merchants warn one another. Governors receive reports. Sailors exchange observations. Every successful encounter contributes to Blackbeard's growing notoriety. The more famous he becomes, the easier it is to influence behavior through reputation alone. What makes this transformation particularly fascinating is its intentional nature. Imagine a leader consciously crafting a public image designed to achieve strategic goals. Modern audiences might compare such efforts to branding or public relations. Blackbeard recognizes that perception shapes reality. If opponents believe he is unstoppable, they behave differently than if they view him as merely another pirate. As months pass, Edward Teach gradually disappears behind the persona he has created. Imagine the distinction between the private individual and the public figure becoming increasingly blurred. Sailors no longer discuss Teach. They discuss Blackbeard. The name itself evokes images of danger, smoke, weapons, and authority. A legend is emerging, and its creator understands exactly what he is doing. By the end of this phase of his career, Blackbeard has accomplished something remarkable. He has transformed fear into a strategic asset. He has built a reputation capable of influencing decisions across the Atlantic world. Merchant captains know his name. Colonial officials recognize the threat he represents. Pirate crews respect his leadership. And this is only the beginning. The legend is growing stronger with every voyage. Soon Blackbeard will acquire a ship powerful enough to match his reputation, and his influence will expand across some of the busiest trade routes in the world. As the legend of Blackbeard begins spreading through ports, taverns, merchant offices, and colonial capitals across the Atlantic world, it becomes increasingly difficult to separate the man from the image he has created. This process is not unusual in history. Many famous figures become larger than life because stories about them evolve faster than facts. Yet Blackbeard occupies a unique position because he appears to encourage this transformation actively. Rather than resisting exaggeration, he benefits from it. Every frightening rumor strengthens his position. Every dramatic tale increases the likelihood that future opponents will surrender without resistance. In effect, Blackbeard turns storytelling into a weapon. Imagine a merchant ship approaching the Caribbean during the early 18th century. The captain gathers information whenever possible because knowledge contributes to survival. Sailors arriving from other ports share news about weather, trade conditions, naval patrols, and pirate activity. Increasingly, one name appears in these conversations: Blackbeard. Some stories are accurate, others are embellished, yet all contribute to a growing atmosphere of fear. Picture sailors exchanging accounts late at night in a crowded waterfront tavern. One claims to have seen Blackbeard's ship pursuing a merchant vessel. Another describes his appearance in vivid detail. A third repeats rumors heard from someone else entirely. The stories grow more dramatic with each retelling. Human beings naturally emphasize memorable details, and Blackbeard provides many such details. His beard, weapons, and theatrical presentation make him ideal material for storytelling. This phenomenon creates a feedback loop. Imagine hearing repeated accounts describing a pirate as nearly invincible. When confronted with the possibility of encountering him personally, fear influences expectations. Merchant crews become more likely to surrender. Successful surrenders generate additional stories. The reputation strengthens further. Blackbeard's image becomes increasingly detached from any single encounter because it now exists independently within popular imagination. At the same time, Blackbeard continues developing practical leadership skills. Imagine commanding a pirate crew composed of individuals from different backgrounds. Maintaining authority requires more than intimidation. Successful leaders must distribute rewards fairly, manage conflicts effectively, and make sound strategic decisions. Pirate crews often possess greater influence over leadership selection than crews aboard merchant or naval vessels. Captains therefore depend partly upon continued support from those they command. Historical evidence suggests that Blackbeard understands these realities. Imagine him balancing personal authority with crew expectations. He must inspire confidence while maintaining discipline. He must identify profitable opportunities without exposing the crew to unnecessary risks. These responsibilities require judgment as well as courage. A reputation for fear alone cannot sustain leadership indefinitely. The waters of the Caribbean and the Atlantic seaboard provide ideal environments for expanding influence. Imagine busy shipping lanes connecting colonies with Europe. Merchant vessels carry valuable cargoes through predictable routes. Pirates monitor traffic patterns carefully. Geography offers numerous islands, inlets, and hidden anchorages suitable for temporary bases. Blackbeard operates within a maritime landscape filled with opportunity. Colonial governments become increasingly concerned. Imagine governors receiving reports about pirate activity affecting commerce. Merchants complain about losses. Insurance costs rise. Trade disruptions create economic consequences. Authorities recognize that piracy threatens not only individual ships but broader systems of commerce and governance. Blackbeard's growing reputation therefore attracts attention far beyond the immediate world of sailors and merchants. One reason Blackbeard becomes especially famous is that he appears at the right moment historically. Imagine the golden age of piracy reaching its peak. Several notable pirate captains operate simultaneously. Public interest in their activities is high. Newspapers, letters, and official reports circulate information widely. Blackbeard benefits from existing fascination with piracy while distinguishing himself through unique presentation. His appearance remains central to this distinction. Imagine observing him during a confrontation at sea. Multiple pistols hang from his body. Weapons are displayed prominently. Smoke from slow-burning fuses surrounds his face. The goal is not merely practical readiness for combat. It is theater. Blackbeard understands that human beings respond emotionally to visual impressions. By appearing larger than life, he increases psychological pressure upon opponents. The effectiveness of this approach becomes evident repeatedly. Imagine merchant captains evaluating options during encounters. Resistance carries risks. Surrender may preserve lives. If Blackbeard's reputation suggests overwhelming danger, the calculation changes. Fear reduces willingness to fight. The pirate captain achieves objectives with less effort. In this sense, his image functions as a force multiplier. Yet the growing legend also creates challenges. Imagine becoming so famous that authorities feel compelled to respond. Success attracts attention. Every captured vessel generates reports. Every story reaching colonial capitals increases pressure for action. Blackbeard's reputation protects him in some situations, but it also ensures that governments cannot ignore him indefinitely. Another interesting aspect of his rise involves the contrast between myth and reality. Imagine modern audiences encountering Blackbeard primarily through fiction. Popular portrayals often emphasize cruelty and chaos. Historical evidence paints a more complicated picture. He is certainly a pirate engaged in criminal activities, yet he also appears strategic and calculated. The image of uncontrolled violence does not always align with available records. Fear remains important, but fear is often employed as a tool rather than an objective. This distinction helps explain why Blackbeard achieves such prominence. Many pirates seek wealth. Some pursue notoriety. Blackbeard appears to understand how the two goals can reinforce one another. A powerful reputation creates economic advantages. Economic success strengthens the reputation further. The cycle continues. As months turn into years, the transformation becomes complete. Edward Teach, the sailor whose early life remains partly obscure, now exists primarily as Blackbeard, the pirate whose name inspires fear across the Atlantic world. Merchants alter behavior because of him. Sailors tell stories about him. Governors discuss him in official correspondence. Few pirates achieve comparable recognition during their lifetimes. Yet history contains an important lesson repeated countless times. The qualities that create extraordinary success often create extraordinary opposition. Blackbeard's reputation has become one of his greatest strengths. It is also becoming one of his greatest vulnerabilities. The more famous he becomes, the more determined his enemies will become. And soon, at the height of his power, Blackbeard will acquire a vessel worthy of his growing legend. A ship that will carry him toward the peak of his influence, and eventually toward his final voyage. Part 3: The Queen Anne's Revenge, Master of the Atlantic. As the sun rises over the warm waters of the Caribbean, and the Atlantic trade routes grow busier with merchant vessels carrying fortunes in cargo between continents, Blackbeard enters the most powerful phase of his career. By now, the transformation from Edward Teach to Blackbeard is largely complete. His reputation stretches across the sea lanes of the Atlantic world. Merchants speak his name with concern. Sailors exchange stories about him in distant ports. Colonial officials receive reports describing his growing influence. Yet reputation alone cannot dominate the seas. To achieve true power, a pirate captain requires a ship capable of supporting his ambitions. For Blackbeard, that ship would become one of the most famous pirate vessels in history, the Queen Anne's Revenge. The story of this ship marks a turning point not only in Blackbeard's life but also in the broader history of piracy. With her powerful armament, imposing appearance, and strategic value, she transformed Blackbeard from a successful pirate into a figure whose influence could affect entire regions. Imagine the Caribbean during 1717. Merchant shipping continues to expand. European empires compete for wealth. Valuable cargoes move constantly between colonies and home ports. The opportunities available to pirates remain considerable, but so do the challenges. Capturing ships requires resources. Maintaining authority requires strength. Blackbeard understands that success depends upon controlling not only people but also infrastructure. Ships are the foundation of maritime power. One of the most significant moments in Blackbeard's career occurs when he captures a large French slave ship known as La Concorde. Imagine the scene. The vessel sails through Atlantic waters carrying cargo and operating according to the commercial systems of its era. Blackbeard's forces intercept the ship. Through a combination of intimidation, strategy, and superior positioning, the pirates successfully seize control. The capture represents far more than a simple addition to pirate resources. provides Blackbeard with an opportunity to reshape his future. Imagine standing on the deck of the captured vessel for the first time. Compared with many ships available to pirates, La Concorde is large, capable, and adaptable. Her size offers significant advantages. More crew members can be accommodated. Additional supplies can be stored. Greater firepower can be carried. Blackbeard recognizes these possibilities immediately. Rather than merely using the vessel temporarily, he transforms it into the centerpiece of his growing enterprise. The ship receives a new name, Queen Anne's Revenge. Imagine the symbolism associated with such a choice. Names matter at sea. They communicate identity, intention, and aspiration. Whether the name reflects political sympathies, personal preferences, or strategic considerations remains a subject of discussion among historians. What is clear is that the new name contributes to the emerging legend. The vessel becomes associated directly with Blackbeard's image and ambitions. Extensive modifications follow. Imagine pirates working across the ship, preparing her for a new role. Cannons are added. Equipment is reorganized. The vessel is adapted for piracy rather than conventional commerce. By the time these changes are complete, the Queen Anne's Revenge has become one of the most heavily armed pirate ships operating in Atlantic waters. Historical accounts suggest that she carries around 40 guns, an impressive number for a vessel under pirate control. The psychological impact of such a ship cannot be overstated. Imagine a merchant captain scanning the horizon and identifying an approaching vessel. As distance closes, the size of the ship becomes apparent. Cannons line the sides. Sails fill with wind. Armed men occupy the deck. If the black flags associated with piracy become visible, the situation grows even more alarming. Resistance suddenly appears less attractive. Blackbeard's strategy of intimidation becomes even more effective when supported by overwhelming firepower. The Queen Anne's Revenge functions as more than a ship. Imagine it as a floating headquarters, military platform, and symbol of authority combined into one. Pirate operations require coordination. Captured goods must be stored and distributed. Crew members require supplies. Strategic decisions must be communicated. The vessel provides a base from which Blackbeard can project power across wide areas of ocean. Life aboard such a ship is complex. Imagine hundreds of individuals occupying a space constantly in motion. Sailors maintain rigging and sails. Gunners oversee weapons. Officers assist with navigation and discipline. Supplies must be managed carefully because successful voyages depend upon logistics as much as courage. The romantic image of piracy often overlooks these practical realities. Ships are communities as well as weapons. Their success depends upon organization. Blackbeard's leadership appears well suited to these demands. Imagine him moving through the vessel, interacting with crew members, reviewing plans, and evaluating opportunities. Effective pirate captains must balance authority with cooperation. Excessive harshness can create resentment. Excessive leniency can undermine discipline. Historical evidence suggests that Blackbeard manages these challenges successfully, at least during the height of his career. The Atlantic world responds to his growing influence. Imagine merchants receiving warnings about pirate activity. Insurance costs increase. Trade routes are adjusted. Captains become more cautious. Every successful operation reinforces Blackbeard's reputation while demonstrating the practical consequences of piracy. The Queen Anne's Revenge becomes recognizable enough that reports about her movements attract significant attention. One of the reasons Blackbeard achieves such prominence is that he understands visibility. Imagine a pirate captain who remains hidden and anonymous. Such a figure may achieve temporary success, but lasting influence remains limited. Blackbeard takes a different approach. He allows stories to spread. He cultivates an image. The Queen Anne's Revenge serves as a physical manifestation of that image. The ship is not merely functional. It is impressive. The Caribbean and Atlantic seaboard become his stage. Imagine voyages carrying the Queen Anne's Revenge through regions where merchant traffic is heavy and opportunities are abundant. Every successful encounter adds another chapter to the legend. Sailors describe the ship in vivid detail. Colonial officials mention her in correspondence. The vessel becomes almost as famous as her captain. Yet power carries risks. Imagine the challenges associated with commanding a large and heavily armed ship. Maintenance demands increase. Supplies are consumed rapidly. Visibility attracts attention from enemies as well as admirers. The larger the reputation becomes, the more difficult it is to avoid confrontation indefinitely. Blackbeard may dominate trade routes, but he cannot escape the realities of geography and politics forever. For now, however, he stands at the peak of his influence. The Queen Anne's Revenge sails beneath favorable winds. Merchant captains fear encountering her. Pirate crews respect her. Colonial authorities worry about her. Blackbeard has achieved what few pirates ever manage. He has become both a practical threat and a cultural phenomenon. And as the Atlantic sun reflects from the waves surrounding his famous ship, it seems as though his rise may continue indefinitely. But history has a way of changing direction unexpectedly. Even the most powerful pirate cannot control every current. As the Queen Anne's Revenge cuts through the waters of the Caribbean and the Atlantic coast, Blackbeard reaches a level of influence that few pirates in history ever achieve. For a brief period, he is not merely participating in piracy. He is shaping the maritime environment around him. Merchant captains alter routes to avoid his territory. Colonial officials exchange urgent correspondence regarding his activities. Sailors tell stories about his ship in ports separated by thousands of miles. The combination of a powerful vessel, a carefully cultivated reputation, and favorable historical circumstances allows Blackbeard to become something larger than an individual pirate. He becomes a symbol of the golden age of piracy itself. Imagine standing aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge during one of her voyages. The ship moves confidently across open water beneath towering sails. Cannons line the deck. Crew members carry out responsibilities with practiced efficiency. The vessel represents a remarkable concentration of maritime power for an organization operating outside conventional legal authority. While European empires possess larger navies overall, individual merchant ships often find themselves vulnerable when confronted by such a formidable opponent. The success of the Queen Anne's Revenge depends upon more than firepower. Imagine the importance of information. Pirates rely heavily upon knowledge of shipping patterns, cargoes, weather conditions, and local geography. Blackbeard benefits from networks of sailors, informants, and maritime contacts capable of providing valuable intelligence. Knowing where profitable targets are likely to appear can be as important as possessing cannons. Geography also favors him. Imagine the Caribbean and southeastern coast of North America during the early 18th century. Numerous islands, inlets, rivers, and coastal passages create opportunities for concealment and maneuvering. Local knowledge becomes a strategic asset. Experienced captains can exploit shallow waters and complex coastlines in ways difficult for outsiders to anticipate. Blackbeard appears highly skilled at using environmental advantages to support operations. One of the most interesting aspects of his rise involves the balance between violence and restraint. Imagine a merchant captain confronted by Blackbeard's ship. The obvious threat of force exists, yet historical evidence suggests that Blackbeard often prefers surrender to battle. Combat carries risks for pirates as well as merchants. Ships can be damaged. Crew members can be injured or killed. Cargoes can be lost. Fear, therefore, becomes a cost-effective alternative. A reputation for overwhelming power allows objectives to be achieved with fewer confrontations. This approach contributes significantly to Blackbeard's success. Imagine hearing stories about a pirate who consistently secures surrender without unnecessary destruction. Such stories spread rapidly because they affect decision-making. Merchant crews become more likely to comply. Resistance declines. The cycle reinforces itself. Reputation produces results, and results strengthen reputation. The Queen Anne's Revenge plays a central role in this process because appearances matter. Imagine seeing the ship emerge on the horizon. Her size, armament, and crew immediately communicate strength. Long before negotiations begin, psychological pressure is already influencing outcomes. Blackbeard understands that maritime encounters involve perception as much as reality. As his influence grows, colonial authorities become increasingly alarmed. Imagine governors responsible for protecting commerce and maintaining order. Reports describing Blackbeard's activities arrive regularly. Merchants complain about losses. Insurance costs rise. Public concern increases. Governments recognize that piracy threatens economic interests and challenges official authority. Blackbeard's growing fame ensures that he cannot remain ignored indefinitely. Yet from Blackbeard's perspective, this period represents the fulfillment of years of ambition and experience. Imagine reflecting upon the path from ordinary sailor to renowned pirate captain. Skills acquired through maritime service, privateering, and early pirate operations now combine effectively. Leadership, navigation, intimidation, and strategy all contribute to success. Few individuals achieve comparable prominence within such a competitive and dangerous environment. The crew benefits from this success as well. Imagine life aboard a vessel operating at the peak of its effectiveness. Captured goods provide resources. Victories enhance confidence. Shared experiences strengthen group identity. Pirate crews are not homogeneous, but successful operations encourage cooperation. For a time, Blackbeard appears capable of maintaining both authority and loyalty. Nevertheless, warning signs exist beneath the surface. Imagine the practical challenges associated with sustaining such a large operation. Ships require maintenance. Supplies must be replenished. Crew expectations must be managed. Political pressure continues increasing. Every successful raid generates attention. The very factors contributing to Blackbeard's fame also increase the likelihood of future opposition. History frequently demonstrates that rapid rises are difficult to sustain indefinitely. Imagine a figure becoming so prominent that powerful institutions feel compelled to respond. Blackbeard's reputation now extends far beyond the world of sailors and merchants. Colonial governments view him as a problem requiring action. Naval authorities monitor developments. Economic interests demand protection. The pirate captain who once benefited from limited enforcement now faces growing scrutiny. Another challenge involves scale. Imagine commanding a small vessel capable of moving quickly and avoiding detection. Compare this with commanding the Queen Anne's Revenge, a ship large enough to attract attention wherever she goes. Greater power brings greater visibility. Escaping notice becomes increasingly difficult. Blackbeard may dominate local encounters, but broader political forces are beginning to align against him. Yet none of this is immediately obvious from the deck of the Queen Anne's Revenge. Imagine standing there as the ship sails confidently through warm Atlantic waters. The crew is experienced. The vessel is powerful. The captain is famous. Opportunities remain abundant. Success appears secure. This moment represents the high point of Blackbeard's career. The legend has been established. The reputation has been earned. The ship has become one of the most feared vessels on the Atlantic. For a brief time, Blackbeard truly appears to be master of his domain. But history rarely allows such moments to last forever. Beyond the horizon, events are already beginning to unfold that will change everything. Political pressure is increasing. Enemies are paying attention. And the voyage that will eventually become Blackbeard's final voyage is slowly approaching. The rise is complete. The peak has been reached. Soon the descent will begin. Part 4: The Blockade of Charleston. Blackbeard at the height of his power. As the sun rises over the Atlantic coastline of North America and the warm waters of the Carolinas shimmer beneath a golden morning sky, Blackbeard enters the most audacious phase of his career. The years spent building his reputation, capturing ships, and commanding the mighty Queen Anne's Revenge have transformed him into one of the most feared figures in the Atlantic world. Merchant captains know his name. Sailors tell stories about him in ports from the Caribbean to New England. Colonial governors receive reports about his activities with growing concern. Yet even at the height of his fame, Blackbeard continues searching for opportunities to strengthen his position. His ambition has not diminished. If anything, success appears to encourage even greater boldness. The event that best illustrates this confidence occurs in the spring of 1718, when Blackbeard carries out one of the most remarkable operations in pirate history, the blockade of Charleston. Imagine the colonial port of Charleston, located in what is now South Carolina. During the early 18th century, Charleston is one of the most important ports in British North America. Merchant vessels arrive regularly carrying goods, passengers, and information. The city serves as a vital center of trade, connecting the American colonies with the Caribbean, Europe, and beyond. Ships entering and leaving the harbor support local economies and contribute to the prosperity of the region. To colonial officials and merchants, the harbor represents commerce, opportunity, and connection to the wider world. Now imagine waking one morning to discover that one of the most feared pirates in the Atlantic has positioned himself outside the harbor entrance. Blackbeard's decision to blockade Charleston is extraordinary because it demonstrates a level of confidence rarely associated with piracy. Imagine most pirates operating by surprise, targeting isolated vessels before disappearing quickly. Blackbeard chooses a different approach. Rather than hiding, he makes his presence impossible to ignore. The Queen Anne's Revenge and accompanying vessels establish control over access to one of the busiest ports in British America. Merchant ships attempting to enter or leave the harbor suddenly find themselves at the mercy of pirate forces. The operation reveals much about Blackbeard's understanding of power. Imagine standing aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge as ships approach Charleston. The pirate fleet occupies a strategic position. Every vessel attempting to pass must confront the reality of Blackbeard's presence. The psychological impact alone is enormous. Merchants expect danger on distant sea routes, They do not expect a pirate commander to challenge a major colonial port so openly. Several ships are captured during the blockade. Imagine merchant captains watching armed pirates board their vessels while realizing that resistance would likely be futile. Blackbeard's reputation continues working in his favor. Fear influences decisions long before violence becomes necessary. Captured crews and passengers suddenly find themselves involved in one of the most dramatic episodes of the golden age of piracy. Among those taken are individuals whose status attracts particular attention. Imagine prominent passengers, merchants, and colonial figures discovering that they have become bargaining tools within Blackbeard's strategy. The pirate captain understands leverage. By controlling access to Charleston and detaining influential people, he gains the ability to negotiate from a position of strength. One of the most surprising aspects of the blockade involves Blackbeard's demands. Imagine colonial authorities anxiously awaiting instructions regarding how to respond. Instead of requesting enormous quantities of gold or silver, Blackbeard reportedly demands a chest of medical supplies. The request seems unusual at first glance, yet it reflects practical realities. Life at sea exposes crews to injuries, disease, and harsh conditions. Medicines are valuable resources. Their importance often exceeds that of luxury goods when survival and effectiveness are concerned. The negotiations create tension throughout Charleston. Imagine merchants, officials, and residents discussing the situation. Trade has been disrupted. Important individuals remain in pirate custody. A feared outlaw controls access to the harbor. The psychological effect extends beyond immediate economic concerns. Blackbeard is demonstrating that colonial authorities cannot guarantee security even near major population centers. Eventually, the requested supplies are delivered. Imagine the relief felt by hostages and officials as arrangements are completed. Captives are released. The immediate crisis ends. Yet the broader significance remains. Blackbeard has successfully challenged a major colonial port and achieved his objectives without facing decisive opposition. The operation reinforces his reputation dramatically. To understand why this event matters, imagine how news spreads throughout the Atlantic world. Ships carry reports to distant destinations. Merchants discuss implications. Colonial governments exchange correspondence. Sailors retell the story repeatedly. Every version emphasizes Blackbeard's boldness. He has not merely captured isolated merchant vessels. He has effectively controlled access to one of British America's most important ports. The blockade also highlights the limitations of colonial defenses. Imagine officials reviewing events afterward. Why was a pirate able to operate so openly? Why were responses so limited? Such questions reveal challenges facing governments during the early 18th century. Naval resources are not always available where needed. Communication takes time. Coordinated action proves difficult. Pirates exploit these weaknesses effectively. For Blackbeard, the success of the blockade represents the culmination of years spent building influence. Imagine standing on the deck of the Queen Anne's Revenge after the operation concludes. The pirate captain has demonstrated not only strength but also strategic sophistication. He understands economics, psychology, and negotiation. His reputation reaches new heights. Yet success often carries hidden costs. The more famous Blackbeard becomes, the more dangerous his position grows. Every merchant affected by his actions becomes a potential advocate for stronger enforcement. Every governor embarrassed by his success becomes more determined to restore authority. Every report describing his exploits increases pressure for action. At the moment, however, none of this appears immediately threatening. The blockade has succeeded. The legend has grown. Blackbeard stands at the height of his power. And from the perspective of those watching events unfold, it may seem as though nothing can stop him. As the Queen Anne's Revenge sails away from Charleston and the immediate excitement of the blockade begins fading into memory, Blackbeard finds himself in a position few pirates ever achieve. He has become more than a successful maritime outlaw. He has become a political problem. Colonial officials discuss him in formal correspondence. Merchants calculate losses associated with his activities. Governors worry about public perceptions of their ability to maintain order. The distinction is important because piracy becomes most dangerous to governments not when it is merely criminal, but when it appears capable of challenging authority itself. The blockade of Charleston demonstrates precisely that possibility. Imagine the Atlantic world during the months following the blockade. Reports circulate widely. Ships arriving in distant ports bring news of Blackbeard's actions. Merchants gather in counting houses to discuss implications. Sailors exchange stories in waterfront taverns. Newspapers and official documents carry accounts of the pirate who effectively controlled access to a major colonial harbor. Every retelling enhances the sense that Blackbeard operates on a scale beyond that of ordinary pirates. The success of the blockade reinforces one of Blackbeard's greatest strengths: his ability to combine practical objectives with symbolic impact. Imagine capturing a single merchant vessel. Such an act may generate profit, but its broader significance remains limited. Now imagine disrupting commerce associated with an entire port. The economic consequences become more visible. The psychological effects become more widespread. Blackbeard understands that influence depends partly upon perception. By targeting Charleston, he creates a spectacle as well as a strategic victory. The operation also reveals his confidence. Imagine commanding a fleet near one of the most important settlements in British North America. Such behavior requires boldness because failure could prove disastrous. Colonial authorities might organize resistance. Naval forces might appear unexpectedly. Weather conditions might complicate operations. Yet Blackbeard proceeds regardless. The willingness to accept such risks contributes significantly to his reputation. Life aboard the pirate fleet during this period likely reflects a mixture of confidence and uncertainty. Imagine crew members discussing recent successes while enjoying the rewards associated with piracy. Captured goods provide resources. Victories strengthen morale. The blockade has demonstrated the effectiveness of their leadership. Yet experienced sailors understand that circumstances can change quickly. Success attracts attention. Attention attracts opposition. One of the most interesting aspects of Blackbeard's career involves the relationship between fear and reality. Imagine a merchant captain hearing stories about the pirate months before an encounter occurs. By the time the two ships meet, expectations have already been shaped by rumor and reputation. Blackbeard benefits enormously from this process. The image he has cultivated continues influencing behavior even when he is not physically present. The Charleston blockade amplifies this effect dramatically. Imagine colonial residents discussing the event long after it ends. Some emphasize Blackbeard's courage. Others focus on government weakness. Still others exaggerate details unknowingly. Human memory often transforms unusual events into stories that become more dramatic over time. Blackbeard's legend grows through this process. At the same time, practical challenges begin emerging. Imagine maintaining a large pirate operation. Ships require repairs. Supplies must be replenished. Crew expectations remain high. Managing resources becomes increasingly complex. Success creates obligations as well as opportunities. The larger the enterprise becomes, the more difficult it is to sustain indefinitely. Political pressure intensifies as well. Imagine governors receiving complaints from merchants whose interests have been affected. Commerce forms the foundation of colonial economies. Disruptions therefore generate serious concern. Authorities may tolerate limited piracy temporarily when resources are scarce, but highly visible figures like Blackbeard eventually become difficult to ignore. His fame ensures that discussions about piracy increasingly revolve around him specifically. Another important development involves changing attitudes toward piracy more broadly. Imagine the golden age of piracy reaching a stage where governments begin coordinating responses more effectively. Earlier conditions that allowed piracy to flourish are starting to change. Naval patrols expand. Enforcement efforts improve. Political leaders recognize that unchecked piracy threatens long-term economic interests. Blackbeard may be enjoying unprecedented success, but the environment supporting that success is evolving. Yet, from Blackbeard's perspective, these larger trends may seem distant. Imagine standing on the deck of the Queen Anne's Revenge after months of successful operations. The fleet remains active. Opportunities continue appearing. Fear continues working in his favor. Immediate evidence suggests strength rather than vulnerability. Human beings often evaluate circumstances based upon recent experiences, and recent experiences have rewarded boldness consistently. History repeatedly demonstrates this pattern. Individuals who achieve extraordinary prominence often become targets precisely because of their success. Blackbeard's rise follows the same logic. Every successful operation increases rewards. Every successful operation also increases pressure. The months following Charleston therefore represent a turning point. Outwardly, Blackbeard appears stronger than ever. His reputation has never been greater. His influence extends across vast regions of the Atlantic world. His enemies fear him. His crew respects him. His name inspires immediate recognition. Yet beneath this impressive surface, circumstances are beginning to shift. Political opposition is growing. Colonial authorities are becoming more determined. The age that allowed pirates to flourish is slowly changing. And Blackbeard, whether he realizes it or not, is approaching the beginning of his final chapter. The peak of his power has arrived. Soon, the forces gathering against him will begin moving into action. And the voyage that history remembers as Blackbeard's last will finally begin. Part 5: Trouble Within the Pirate Empire. Life in North Carolina. As the warm Atlantic winds sweep across the coastline of the Carolinas, and the excitement surrounding the blockade of Charleston begins to fade into memory, Blackbeard enters a new and far more uncertain phase of his career. From a distance, he appears stronger than ever. His name is feared across the Atlantic world. His exploits are discussed in colonial capitals and waterfront taverns alike. Merchants continue to regard him as one of the greatest threats to maritime commerce. Yet history often reveals a curious pattern. The moment when powerful figures appear most secure is sometimes the moment when hidden weaknesses begin to emerge. For Blackbeard, the months following the Charleston blockade mark the beginning of a gradual transition. The fearless pirate who once seemed unstoppable now faces challenges that cannot be solved through intimidation alone. These challenges arise not from dramatic naval battles or sudden betrayals, but from the practical realities of maintaining power in a changing world. Imagine the waters surrounding the coast of present-day North Carolina during the summer of 1718. Unlike the busy harbors of Charleston or the crowded trade routes of the Caribbean, this region possesses a different character. Long stretches of coastline are broken by inlets, shallow channels, marshlands, and barrier islands. Navigation is often difficult for outsiders. Hidden anchorages provide shelter from storms and unwanted attention. To pirates, such geography offers significant advantages. Ships can disappear into coastal waters where larger naval vessels struggle to operate effectively. Blackbeard understands these advantages well. Imagine him studying charts and local conditions while considering future plans. The North Carolina coast offers opportunities for concealment and security. It provides distance from heavily monitored trade centers while remaining connected to important maritime routes. For a pirate captain seeking flexibility, the region appears attractive. One of the most significant events during this period involves the fate of the Queen Anne's Revenge. Imagine the famous ship, the vessel that carried Blackbeard to the height of his power, approaching the North Carolina coast. The waters here can be treacherous. Sandbars shift, channels change. Navigation requires local knowledge and constant attention. At some point during this period, the Queen Anne's Revenge runs aground. The circumstances surrounding the grounding remain debated by historians. Imagine the uncertainty surrounding such an event. Was it an accident caused by difficult conditions? Was it a deliberate decision intended to reduce the size of Blackbeard's operation? Different interpretations exist. Regardless of the cause, the consequences are substantial. The pirate captain loses the vessel most closely associated with his rise to power. Picture the scene from the perspective of those aboard. The ship that symbolized Blackbeard's dominance now sits stranded. Efforts to free her prove unsuccessful. Supplies, equipment, and personnel must be redistributed. The loss is not merely practical. It is symbolic. The Queen Anne's Revenge had become an extension of Blackbeard's reputation. Without her, a chapter of his career effectively comes to an end. The grounding creates additional complications. Imagine a large pirate fleet operating successfully for years. Such organizations depend upon resources, coordination, and leadership. Changes in structure inevitably affect relationships. Some crew members may question decisions. Others may pursue independent opportunities. Maintaining unity becomes more difficult when circumstances shift unexpectedly. Historians have long debated whether Blackbeard intentionally reduced the size of his crew during this period. Imagine a leader evaluating risks and rewards carefully. Large pirate organizations can be effective, but they also require greater resources and create greater visibility. Smaller groups are easier to manage and less likely to attract immediate attention. If Blackbeard consciously chose to streamline operations, the decision would reflect strategic thinking rather than weakness. Whatever his motivations, the result is clear. The pirate enterprise that once seemed expansive and unstoppable becomes more compact. Imagine Blackbeard moving through the shallow waters of North Carolina with a reduced force, relying increasingly on local connections and regional knowledge rather than overwhelming maritime strength. The transformation is subtle but important. Life along the North Carolina coast differs significantly from life aboard a large pirate flagship. Imagine quiet anchorages hidden among barrier islands. Fishing boats move through shallow channels. Small settlements dot the coastline. The pace feels slower than the bustling commercial centers of the Caribbean. Yet appearances can be misleading. Beneath the surface, political relationships and economic interests continue shaping events. One of the most intriguing aspects of this period involves Blackbeard's interactions with colonial authorities. Imagine a pirate captain who has spent years operating outside the law now engaging with local officials. During the early 18th century, boundaries between legality and illegality can sometimes be surprisingly flexible. Colonial governors often face competing priorities. Economic development, political stability, and personal interests all influence decisions. Blackbeard benefits from these complexities. Imagine arriving in a region where enforcement resources are limited and local leaders may view matters pragmatically. Opportunities arise for negotiation, accommodation, and temporary coexistence. The pirate captain who once relied primarily upon fear now explores different methods of maintaining security. Another challenge involves the nature of reputation itself. Imagine spending years cultivating an image of unstoppable power. Such images can be useful, but they also create expectations. Followers expect success. Enemies anticipate aggression. Maintaining the legend requires constant effort. The loss of the queen ends revenge, and the reduction of operations create tensions between appearance and reality. Yet Blackbeard remains remarkably resilient. Imagine adapting to changing circumstances while preserving authority. Many leaders fail when confronted with setbacks. Blackbeard appears capable of adjusting strategies. He continues operating. He continues influencing events. The legend remains intact, at least for now. As summer progresses and the North Carolina coast stretches beneath endless skies, the pirate captain finds himself at a crossroads. The years of rapid expansion are over. The great flagship is gone. The organization is changing. Yet opportunities remain. From a distance, it may seem as though Blackbeard is settling into a quieter phase of life. The reality is more complicated. The decisions made during these months will shape everything that follows. And while Blackbeard navigates the shallow waters of North Carolina, powerful figures elsewhere are beginning to discuss a question that will soon change his future. How can the most famous pirate in the Atlantic finally be stopped? As the days pass along the North Carolina coast and Blackbeard adjusts to life without the Queen Anne's revenge, the contrast between his public reputation and private circumstances becomes increasingly striking. To merchants in distant ports, he remains the terrifying pirate who blockaded Charleston and commanded one of the most formidable vessels in Atlantic waters. To colonial governors, he remains a symbol of the challenges posed by piracy. Yet, in the quiet inlets and sheltered anchorages of North Carolina, the reality is more nuanced. Blackbeard is no longer constantly pursuing dramatic victories. Instead, he is navigating a complex landscape shaped by politics, economics, and survival. Imagine the coastal settlements of North Carolina during 1718. The colony differs from some of its neighbors. Population centers are relatively small. Government institutions possess limited resources. Transportation and communication can be difficult. Residents often depend upon maritime trade, local agriculture, and personal relationships. Authority exists, but enforcing it consistently across scattered communities presents challenges. In such an environment, practical considerations often influence decisions more than abstract principles. Imagine a local official confronted with the presence of a famous pirate. Theoretically, the law demands action. In practice, circumstances may be more complicated. Economic benefits, political realities, and limited enforcement capabilities can all affect outcomes. Early colonial life frequently involves negotiation between ideals and practical necessities. Blackbeard appears to understand this reality well. Imagine him interacting with local leaders not as an outlaw hiding from society, but as a figure capable of influencing regional affairs. Historical records suggest that he receives a pardon during this period, taking advantage of efforts by the British government to encourage pirates to abandon their activities. Such pardons represent an attempt to reduce piracy without relying solely on military force. Picture the moment from Blackbeard's perspective. After years of danger, conflict, and uncertainty, an opportunity emerges to obtain legal forgiveness for past actions. The offer is tempting. Many pirates accept similar arrangements. Some genuinely retire. Others use pardons strategically while continuing questionable activities. Determining intentions is often difficult. For Blackbeard, the pardon creates new possibilities. Imagine appearing to leave piracy behind while maintaining connections, resources, and influence. Such a position offers advantages. Legal status improves. Immediate pressure decreases. Local relationships become easier to manage. Yet the transition from pirate captain to ordinary colonial resident is not necessarily straightforward. The question of whether Blackbeard truly intended to retire has fascinated historians for generations. Imagine a man who spent years building a reputation for boldness, independence, and authority. Could such an individual suddenly embrace a quiet life? Perhaps. History contains examples of dramatic personal transformations. Yet there are also reasons for skepticism. Skills developed through piracy remain valuable. Opportunities continue existing. Temptations do not disappear simply because a pardon has been granted. Reports from the period suggest that Blackbeard may continue engaging in activities that occupy a gray area between legality and illegality. Imagine merchant cargoes appearing under uncertain circumstances. Imagine questions regarding ownership, trade, and maritime transactions. Colonial authorities sometimes struggle to distinguish clearly between legitimate commerce and opportunistic behavior. The boundaries are often less rigid than modern observers might expect. Meanwhile, Blackbeard's reputation continues influencing perceptions. Imagine local residents encountering a man whose name is known across the Atlantic world. Stories about him circulate constantly. Some portray him as a ruthless villain. Others emphasize his intelligence and leadership. Personal encounters may differ significantly from popular legends. Such contrasts are common when historical figures achieve extraordinary fame. The political environment surrounding Blackbeard grows increasingly important. Imagine neighboring colonies observing developments with concern. Not all governors share the same priorities. Some favor pragmatic arrangements. Others advocate stronger enforcement. Differences in perspective create tensions. A pirate tolerated in one jurisdiction may be viewed as unacceptable in another. One of the most significant figures watching events unfold is Alexander Spotswood. Imagine a colonial leader determined to strengthen authority and reduce threats to commerce. From his perspective, Blackbeard represents more than an individual criminal. He symbolizes the broader challenge posed by piracy. Allowing such a figure to operate freely risks undermining confidence in government. While Blackbeard enjoys relative security in North Carolina, conversations elsewhere are taking a different tone. Imagine officials reviewing reports, discussing options, and considering possible responses. The pirate captain may feel insulated by geography and local relationships, but geography cannot prevent information from spreading. His fame ensures that powerful people remain interested in his activities. Another factor influencing events is time. Imagine the cumulative effect of years spent in piracy. Enemies accumulate, economic interests suffer, political pressures build. Even if Blackbeard genuinely wishes to reduce risks and avoid conflict, the legacy of his earlier actions remains. Reputations cannot be discarded as easily as ships. The legend continues shaping expectations long after circumstances change. This reality creates a subtle trap. Imagine becoming famous for qualities that later complicate efforts to live quietly. Blackbeard's success has made him recognizable. Recognition attracts attention. Attention generates scrutiny. The very reputation that once protected him now increases vulnerability. As autumn approaches and the coastal waters of North Carolina grow cooler, Blackbeard remains unaware of the full extent of developments occurring beyond his immediate surroundings. He continues navigating a world of local alliances, practical compromises, and uncertain opportunities. Yet larger forces are beginning to move. Merchants want security. Governors want authority. Colonial officials want results. And among those determined to act, one man in particular is becoming increasingly convinced that Blackbeard's story must come to an end. The pirate may believe he has found a place of relative safety. He may believe that geography, influence, and reputation provide protection. But history is quietly gathering momentum, and somewhere beyond the horizon, plans are already being made that will lead directly to the final confrontation. The calm waters of North Carolina are growing still. The storm is approaching, and Blackbeard's last voyage is drawing nearer with every passing day. Part 6: Governor Spotswood's Hunt. Lieutenant Robert Maynard sets sail. As autumn settles across the American colonies in 1718 and cool winds begin moving across the Atlantic coastline, the balance of power that once favored Blackbeard starts to shift. For years, piracy has flourished because of geography, limited enforcement, political complications, and the sheer difficulty of controlling vast stretches of ocean. Blackbeard has benefited from all of these conditions. He has built a reputation powerful enough to influence merchants, sailors, and colonial governments alike. He has commanded one of the most feared ships in the Atlantic. He has blockaded a major port and secured a place among the most famous pirates of his age. Yet history often turns not through sudden accidents but through gradual changes in circumstance. The same forces that once allowed Blackbeard to thrive are now producing a response. Colonial authorities have grown increasingly frustrated. Merchants continue demanding protection. Political leaders recognize that allowing such a famous pirate to operate freely undermines confidence in government. Among those most determined to address the problem is the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Alexander Spotswood. Imagine Virginia during the early 18th century. The colony occupies an important position within Britain's American empire. Tobacco exports generate significant wealth. Trade routes connect local merchants with broader Atlantic markets. Economic stability depends heavily upon maritime commerce. Any threat to shipping therefore affects not only individual merchants but the colony as a whole. Governors understand this reality well. Maintaining secure trade routes becomes a matter of political as well as economic importance. Now imagine Alexander Spotswood reviewing reports arriving from across the region. Merchants describe losses. Officials discuss pirate activity. Correspondence mentions Blackbeard repeatedly. The pirate's reputation is so extensive that his name alone evokes concern. To Spotswood, this situation is unacceptable. He views piracy not merely as a criminal issue but as a challenge to legitimate authority. Governments exist partly to provide security. If a pirate can operate openly while avoiding consequences, public confidence inevitably suffers. Spotswood faces a complication, however. Blackbeard is based primarily in North Carolina rather than Virginia. Imagine the legal and political difficulties this creates. Colonial boundaries matter. Governors possess authority within their own jurisdictions, but acting beyond those boundaries can generate controversy. Ideally, local authorities would address problems occurring within their territories. Yet Spotswood appears increasingly convinced that waiting for others to act is not an acceptable option. Imagine the conversations taking place among colonial officials. Some advocate caution, others emphasize legal concerns. Yet frustration continues growing. Reports suggest that Blackbeard remains active despite receiving a pardon. Rumors circulate regarding questionable activities and ongoing connections to piracy. Whether all such reports are accurate matters less than the broader perception. Many influential people believe that Blackbeard remains a threat. The governor ultimately decides upon a course of action. Imagine the significance of this decision. Rather than relying solely on diplomacy or requests for assistance, Spotswood chooses direct intervention. He begins organizing an expedition designed specifically to capture or eliminate Blackbeard. The decision reflects both determination and political risk. Success could strengthen his reputation considerably. Failure could produce embarrassment and criticism. The challenge lies in selecting the right individual to lead such a mission. Imagine the qualities required. The target is famous, experienced, and dangerous. The operation may involve combat in unfamiliar coastal waters. Leadership, courage, and adaptability will be essential. Spotswood eventually places his confidence in a young naval officer named Robert Maynard. Picture Maynard at this stage of his career. He is ambitious, disciplined, and eager to prove himself. Unlike Blackbeard, whose reputation has been built through years of piracy, Maynard remains relatively unknown. Yet history often brings together established figures and rising challengers in moments that transform both. The assignment presents an opportunity. Success could launch Maynard's reputation. Failure could end his prospects entirely. Imagine receiving such orders. The mission is clear in principle but difficult in practice. Blackbeard is familiar with local geography. He possesses combat experience. His name alone inspires fear among many sailors. Capturing him will require careful planning. Bravery alone will not be sufficient. Preparations begin. Imagine naval personnel gathering information regarding Blackbeard's location and activities. Intelligence becomes crucial. The pirate cannot be defeated if he cannot be found. Reports indicate that he is operating near Ocracoke Inlet, a region characterized by shallow waters and complex navigation. Geography once again plays an important role. Large naval vessels struggle in such environments. Success will depend upon choosing appropriate ships and tactics. Spotswood provides Maynard with two relatively small vessels for the mission. Imagine examining this decision from a strategic perspective. Large warships possess impressive firepower, but they are poorly suited to shallow coastal waters. Smaller vessels offer greater flexibility. They can navigate areas inaccessible to larger ships. The choice reflects practical understanding rather than overwhelming force. The expedition begins moving southward. Imagine the atmosphere aboard the vessels. Sailors understand the significance of their mission. They are not pursuing an anonymous pirate. They are hunting Blackbeard. Stories about him have circulated for years. Some crew members may feel excitement. Others may experience apprehension. Human emotions rarely disappear simply because orders have been given. As the ships sail toward North Carolina, anticipation grows. Imagine watching the coastline appear gradually on the horizon. Somewhere ahead lies the man whose reputation has dominated discussions of piracy throughout the Atlantic world. The encounter feels inevitable, yet uncertainty remains. Blackbeard has escaped danger before. He understands maritime strategy. He may possess allies or advance warning. What makes this moment particularly fascinating is the contrast between the two central figures. Imagine Blackbeard, the legendary pirate captain whose name is known everywhere, and Maynard, the relatively obscure naval officer seeking an opportunity to prove himself. As evening approaches and the expedition continues southward through coastal waters, the stage is being set for one of the most famous confrontations in pirate history. The years of Blackbeard's rise have led inevitably toward this point. Political pressure, economic interests, and personal ambition are combining into a single mission. The hunt has begun, and somewhere near the waters of Ocracoke, Blackbeard remains unaware that his most dangerous enemy is already on the move. As Lieutenant Robert Maynard's expedition advances toward the North Carolina coast and the distance separating hunter and hunted steadily decreases, the atmosphere surrounding the mission becomes increasingly tense. This is no ordinary naval patrol. The objective is not simply to protect shipping or investigate suspicious activity. The objective is Blackbeard himself. For years, his reputation has grown larger than life. Sailors describe him as fearless. Merchants speak of him with frustration. Colonial officials view him as a symbol of piracy's persistence. Capturing such a figure would represent a major victory. Yet reputation cuts both ways. The more famous Blackbeard becomes, the more intimidating the task of confronting him appears. Imagine life aboard Maynard's vessels during these final days before contact. The sea remains unpredictable. Weather conditions fluctuate. Navigation requires constant attention. Yet beneath routine duties lies awareness of the mission's importance. Sailors exchange stories about Blackbeard. Some recount dramatic rumors heard in distant ports. Others discuss more practical concerns, such as his combat experience and familiarity with local waters. The pirate's legend accompanies the expedition even before the man himself appears. Maynard faces several strategic challenges simultaneously. Imagine attempting to confront an opponent who knows the region better than you do. Blackbeard has spent considerable time operating along the North Carolina coast. He understands local geography, anchorages, and channels. His experience provides advantages difficult to overcome through force alone. The lieutenant must therefore rely upon planning and adaptability rather than assuming straightforward superiority. Intelligence reports suggest that Blackbeard is anchored near Ocracoke Inlet. Imagine the setting. Barrier islands separate the Atlantic Ocean from sheltered sounds and waterways. Sandbars shift over time. Channels require careful navigation. Large vessels risk grounding. Smaller craft maneuver more effectively. The environment favors those familiar with its complexities. Blackbeard's choice of location is therefore no accident. He understands the defensive benefits offered by geography. At the same time, Blackbeard's circumstances differ significantly from those of earlier years. Imagine the pirate captain reflecting upon recent developments. The Queen Anne's Revenge is gone. His organization is smaller. Some former associates have moved on. Although his reputation remains formidable, the foundations supporting that reputation have changed. He still commands respect and fear, but he no longer possesses the same scale of resources that once characterized his operations. Whether Blackbeard fully appreciates the danger approaching remains uncertain. Imagine receiving scattered reports regarding possible government interest. Such information may seem routine. Colonial authorities have discussed piracy for years. Threats are common. Actual action is less common. From Blackbeard's perspective, previous experience may encourage confidence. He has survived numerous challenges already. Why should this situation prove different? Meanwhile, Maynard continues closing the distance. Imagine the psychological burden associated with leadership under such circumstances. Officers must inspire confidence while managing risks. Crew members look to their commanders for guidance. Uncertainty affects everyone. Success requires maintaining discipline and focus despite anticipation. One interesting aspect of the expedition involves the contrast between expectations and reality. Imagine sailors picturing Blackbeard as an almost mythical figure based upon years of stories. Human beings often transform famous individuals into symbols larger than life. Yet symbols eventually become real people again when direct encounters occur. The coming confrontation will force both sides to move beyond reputation and confront practical realities. As the expedition approaches Ocracoke, careful preparations become essential. Imagine officers reviewing plans repeatedly. Weapons are checked. Crews receive instructions. Contingencies are considered. Every detail matters because combat at sea can unfold rapidly. Mistakes may prove costly. Success depends upon coordination as much as courage. The geography of the region creates additional complications. Imagine navigating shallow waters where larger ships cannot operate effectively. Movement becomes constrained by environmental factors. Wind, tide, and channel depth influence decisions. Commanders must adapt continuously to changing conditions. Such environments often reward local knowledge and flexibility rather than raw firepower. Blackbeard, for his part, remains a formidable opponent. Imagine a man who has spent years cultivating authority through confidence and strategic thinking. He understands intimidation. He understands maritime combat. He has survived circumstances that might have destroyed less capable individuals. Even reduced resources do not eliminate these strengths. Any attempt to capture him will involve genuine danger. The broader historical significance of the moment is also worth considering. Imagine the golden age of piracy approaching its later stages. Governments are becoming more organized. Naval enforcement is improving. Economic interests increasingly demand security. Blackbeard's fate will symbolize larger trends extending beyond a single individual. If he can be defeated, other pirates may appear more vulnerable as well. Night falls over the coastal waters. Imagine darkness settling across the inlets and sounds. Lantern light reflects gently from the sea. Crew members rest when possible, though true relaxation is difficult. Tomorrow may bring combat. Tomorrow may bring history. The tension is palpable precisely because everyone understands what is at stake. For Maynard, the mission represents opportunity and responsibility simultaneously. Success could establish his reputation permanently. Failure could strengthen the legend he seeks to destroy. For Blackbeard, the situation is equally significant, though he may not yet realize it fully. The choices made in the coming hours will determine how history remembers his final chapter. As dawn approaches and the first hints of light begin appearing above the horizon, two worlds are preparing to collide. On one side stands the most famous pirate in the Atlantic. On the other stands a determined naval officer carrying the authority of empire. Years of piracy, politics, ambition, and conflict have led to this moment. The hunt is nearly over. The trap is almost set, and the battle that will end Blackbeard's reign is only hours away. Part 7: Blackbeard's Last Morning. Entering the Trap. As dawn slowly approaches the waters of Ocracoke Inlet on the morning of November 22, 1718, the story of Blackbeard enters its final and most dramatic chapter. For years, the Atlantic world has watched the rise of a pirate whose reputation grew beyond that of any ordinary outlaw. Merchants feared him. Sailors told stories about him. Colonial governors debated how to stop him. His name became synonymous with piracy itself. Yet on this particular morning, as darkness begins giving way to pale light over the North Carolina coast, none of those stories, fears, or legends can alter a simple reality. Blackbeard is about to face the greatest challenge of his life. The confrontation that will decide his fate is already moving toward him across the quiet waters. The final voyage that began months earlier is reaching its conclusion. Imagine the scene before sunrise. Ocracoke Inlet is calm compared with the open Atlantic. The barrier islands stretch along the horizon, their outlines barely visible in the fading darkness. Gentle waves move through shallow channels shaped by tides and shifting sands. The air carries the coolness of late autumn. Seabirds remain silent. The world feels peaceful, almost untouched by conflict. Nothing in the landscape itself suggests that one of the most famous battles in pirate history is only hours away. Somewhere within these waters, Blackbeard's vessel rests at anchor. Imagine the pirate captain waking before dawn, as experienced sailors often do. The habits of maritime life are difficult to abandon. Years spent at sea train individuals to remain aware of weather, tides, and changing conditions. Blackbeard has lived much of his adult life surrounded by uncertainty. He understands the importance of vigilance. Yet even vigilance has limits. No matter how experienced a person becomes, complete awareness is impossible. Historical accounts suggest that Blackbeard's crew is relatively small during this period compared with the larger operations of earlier years. Imagine moving across the deck and observing familiar faces. These are not the vast pirate fleets sometimes imagined in popular stories. The men aboard are survivors of years spent navigating dangerous waters and pursuing dangerous occupations. They have followed Blackbeard through successes and setbacks alike. They know his reputation. They understand his capabilities. Many likely believe that if trouble appears, their captain will find a way to handle it. The atmosphere aboard the vessel may be relaxed compared with earlier phases of Blackbeard's career. Imagine the difference between commanding the mighty Queen Anne's Revenge during the height of pirate power and operating with a smaller force along the North Carolina coast. The pace has changed. The scale has changed. Yet confidence remains. Blackbeard has escaped danger repeatedly throughout his career. He has survived battles, political pressure, and countless uncertainties. Success often creates a sense of resilience. At the same time, subtle warning signs may exist. Imagine reports filtering through coastal communities regarding increased government interest in piracy. Rumors circulate constantly in maritime environments, making it difficult to distinguish serious threats from ordinary gossip. Blackbeard has undoubtedly heard many warnings over the years. Most have led nowhere. Human beings naturally adjust expectations based upon past experience. If previous dangers failed to materialize, new warnings may seem less urgent. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Robert Maynard continues advancing toward Ocracoke. Imagine the contrast between the two groups. One side begins the morning anchored and relatively stationary. The other moves deliberately toward confrontation. Maynard's men know their objective. They know who they are hunting. Every mile traveled increases anticipation. The expedition is no longer theoretical. The target is close. The geography of Ocracoke plays an important role in events. Imagine studying the region carefully. Shallow waters, narrow channels, and shifting sandbars create natural obstacles. Large warships struggle to operate effectively here. This reality partly explains why Blackbeard chooses the area. Geography provides protection. Yet geography can also create constraints. Movement becomes limited. Escape routes depend upon environmental conditions. Advantages and disadvantages often coexist. As dawn brightens the horizon, routine activities continue aboard Blackbeard's vessel. Imagine sailors preparing food, checking equipment, and discussing plans for the day. Maritime life consists largely of ordinary tasks interrupted occasionally by extraordinary events. Most people experiencing historic moments do not realize they are historic at the time. To those aboard, this morning may initially seem similar to many others. Blackbeard himself remains a fascinating figure during these final hours. Imagine the man behind the legend. Popular stories often portray him as fearless, almost superhuman. Historical reality is undoubtedly more complicated. He is experienced, confident, and capable, but he is also human. Like all leaders, he must interpret information, make decisions, and manage uncertainty. The qualities that contributed to his rise remain present, yet circumstances are changing around him. One of the most interesting questions involves his state of mind. Imagine reflecting upon years spent building a reputation that stretches across the Atlantic world. Blackbeard has achieved a level of fame few pirates ever approach. He has influenced trade routes, challenged colonial authority, and become the subject of countless stories. Did he view himself as secure? Did he anticipate future opportunities? Did he believe retirement remained possible? Historians can only speculate. The morning progresses gradually. Imagine sunlight beginning to illuminate the water more clearly. Visibility improves. Shapes emerge from the distance. Sailors scan horizons as they always do. The sea rarely provides advance notice of significance. Important developments often begin as small details barely noticeable at first. For Maynard's expedition, timing is crucial. Imagine the naval officer reviewing plans one final time. Success depends upon surprise, discipline, and courage. Blackbeard remains dangerous despite reduced resources. Underestimating him would be a mistake. Every participant understands the risks involved. As the gap between hunter and hunted narrows, tension builds invisibly. Neither side can yet see the complete picture. Blackbeard does not fully appreciate how close his enemies have come. Maynard cannot know precisely how events will unfold once contact occurs. History often reaches turning points through such moments of uncertainty. The Atlantic world beyond Ocracoke remains unaware of what is about to happen. Merchants continue conducting business. Colonial officials attend to ordinary responsibilities. Sailors sail along distant routes. Yet within a few hours, news will begin spreading that one of the most famous figures of the golden age of piracy has faced a challenge unlike any before. For now, however, the morning remains calm. The waters remain quiet. The wind moves gently across the inlet. And Blackbeard, standing near the end of a remarkable career, watches a new day begin without realizing that it will be his last. As the sun rises higher above Ocracoke Inlet and the pale colors of dawn give way to the clearer light of morning, the distance between Blackbeard and Lieutenant Robert Maynard continues shrinking. What began as a carefully planned government expedition is rapidly becoming a direct confrontation. The years of Blackbeard's rise, the months of political pressure, and the weeks of preparation have all led to this point. Yet one of the most remarkable aspects of history is that decisive moments often arrive quietly. Before battles become famous, before legends are created, events usually begin with uncertainty. No one involved possesses complete knowledge. Decisions are made in real time, based upon limited information. The morning of November 22nd, 1718, follows this familiar pattern. Imagine standing aboard Blackbeard's vessel as visibility improves. The inlet appears calm. Water reflects the growing sunlight. Coastal features become easier to distinguish. Sailors perform their usual duties while remaining alert to developments. Maritime life requires constant observation because conditions can change rapidly. A distant sail on the horizon may represent opportunity, danger, or nothing at all. Context determines significance. At some point, unusual activity becomes apparent. Imagine crew members noticing approaching vessels. Initially, such sightings may not seem alarming. Ships move through coastal waters regularly. Traders, fishermen, and local craft all utilize the region. Yet experienced sailors learn to pay attention to details. The direction of movement, the number of vessels, and the behavior of crews can reveal intentions. Blackbeard likely recognizes quickly that these approaching ships are not ordinary visitors. Imagine years of experience enabling rapid assessment. Maritime commanders develop instincts regarding potential threats. Certain patterns appear familiar. The approaching vessels do not behave like merchants seeking trade. They move with purpose. Their presence raises questions. The pirate captain now faces a situation requiring immediate judgment. Imagine evaluating possibilities. Are these government forces? Are they pursuing him specifically? How strong are they? What advantages or disadvantages exist? Such calculations occur rapidly because hesitation can be costly. Leadership often involves making decisions before complete information becomes available. One factor working in Blackbeard's favor is confidence. Imagine reflecting upon previous encounters throughout his career. He has faced dangers before and survived. His reputation has been earned through action rather than luck alone. Experienced leaders frequently rely upon past success when confronting new challenges. Confidence can be valuable, though it occasionally encourages risk-taking. The approaching force presents its own challenges. Imagine Maynard observing Blackbeard's position while navigating difficult waters. The geography of Ocracoke complicates operations considerably. Shallow channels restrict movement. Sandbars create hazards. Every decision regarding positioning must account for environmental conditions. The battle has not yet begun, but geography is already influencing events. Historical accounts suggest that Blackbeard may have underestimated the seriousness of the threat initially. Imagine the perspective of a man who has spent years hearing rumors about efforts to capture him. Government officials discuss action frequently. Actual action occurs less often. Previous threats may have faded without consequence. Human beings naturally interpret current events through the lens of past experience. If earlier warnings proved harmless, new warnings may seem less urgent. At the same time, Maynard possesses advantages of his own. Imagine a young officer determined to succeed. Unlike many opponents Blackbeard has faced, Maynard arrives with a specific mission and clear objective. He is not defending a merchant vessel unexpectedly attacked at sea. He is hunting a known target deliberately. This distinction matters because preparation shapes outcomes. The psychological dimensions of the encounter are fascinating. Imagine the two leaders contemplating one another across the water. Blackbeard's reputation is immense. Maynard's determination is equally significant. Each understands that the coming confrontation may define his future. Such moments create pressure difficult to replicate in ordinary circumstances. As the vessels draw closer, options begin narrowing. Imagine the practical realities involved. Escape routes become less attractive. Negotiation appears unlikely. Geography limits maneuverability. The situation increasingly points toward direct conflict. History contains many battles that could have been avoided through different decisions made earlier. By this stage, however, events possess momentum of their own. The crews on both sides experience growing tension. Imagine sailors checking weapons, exchanging brief conversations, and preparing mentally for combat. Regardless of experience, uncertainty remains. No battle unfolds exactly as expected. Individuals may feel courage, fear, excitement, or combinations of all three. Human emotions remain complex even in highly structured situations. Blackbeard's leadership style becomes especially important now. Imagine a captain whose authority rests partly upon reputation and confidence. Maintaining composure influences others. Crews often take cues from leaders during stressful moments. If the captain appears calm, morale improves. If uncertainty becomes visible, anxiety spreads. Blackbeard has spent years cultivating an image of fearlessness. This morning requires him to embody that image once again. Meanwhile, Maynard continues implementing his plan. Imagine balancing aggression with caution. Underestimating Blackbeard could prove disastrous. Overestimating him could create missed opportunities. Effective commanders navigate between these extremes. The lieutenant understands that success depends upon disciplined execution rather than reckless enthusiasm. The distance separating the two forces continues shrinking. Imagine the growing clarity with which details become visible. Faces can be distinguished. Equipment can be identified. Intentions become harder to conceal. What began as distant movement on the horizon is transforming into immediate reality. For Blackbeard, this moment represents the culmination of years spent at the center of Atlantic piracy. Every choice, every success, and every setback has contributed to this morning. The young sailor who once entered pirate circles seeking opportunity could hardly have predicted such an ending. Yet history often concentrates broad trends into specific encounters. The struggle between piracy and government authority, between personal ambition and political power, is about to become intensely personal. The calm of the morning is disappearing. The trap is closing. The hunters have arrived. And within the next few hours, the legend of Blackbeard will face its greatest test. The battle is about to begin. Part 8, The Final Battle, The Death of Blackbeard. As the morning sun rises above the waters of Ocracoke Inlet and the final distance between Blackbeard and Lieutenant Robert Maynard disappears, years of history converge into a single confrontation. The Atlantic world has been moving toward this moment for a long time. Merchants frustrated by piracy, colonial governors determined to restore authority, naval officers seeking success, and pirates fighting to preserve their freedom have all contributed to the circumstances unfolding now. Yet, for the men directly involved, larger historical forces matter less than immediate survival. The coming battle will not be decided by reputation alone. It will be decided by courage, judgment, preparation, luck, and the unpredictable realities of combat. The legend of Blackbeard has grown enormously over the years, but legends offer no protection against musket fire and steel. Imagine the two sides observing one another across the water. The inlet is no longer peaceful. Tension fills the air. Every sailor understands that conflict is imminent. Blackbeard's vessel occupies a position shaped by local geography, while Maynard's smaller ships continue advancing despite the risks. The shallow waters that once helped protect the pirate now create complications for everyone involved. Navigation becomes as important as combat. A ship that grounds unexpectedly may lose critical advantages. Historical accounts indicate that the opening phase of the encounter is influenced heavily by the environment. Imagine the difficulties associated with maneuvering armed vessels through channels filled with shifting sandbars and uncertain depths. Every decision must account for conditions beneath the water as well as threats above it. The sea itself becomes an active participant in events. As the opposing forces draw within range, Blackbeard acts first. Imagine the pirate captain evaluating the situation quickly. Years of maritime experience have taught him the importance of initiative. Waiting passively often allows opponents to dictate circumstances. By striking first, he hopes to exploit advantages before Maynard can fully implement his plans. Cannons roar across the inlet. Imagine the sudden violence breaking the morning silence. Smoke fills the air. The thunder of artillery echoes across the water. Splinters fly from damaged wood. Sailors shout orders while attempting to maintain control amid confusion. The battle that historians will discuss for centuries has begun. The opening exchange proves costly for Maynard's forces. Imagine standing aboard one of the approaching vessels as cannon fire crashes into the hull. Casualties occur quickly. Men are injured or killed. Equipment is damaged. The realities of 18th century naval combat are brutal. Weapons lack modern precision, but at close range they remain devastating. Every broadside carries the potential to alter outcomes dramatically. From Blackbeard's perspective, the initial phase may appear encouraging. Imagine observing enemy vessels suffering damage while your own position remains relatively strong. The pirate captain has survived previous confrontations through boldness and aggression. Early success reinforces confidence. It suggests that experience and determination may once again prove sufficient. Yet Maynard possesses a plan extending beyond the opening exchange. Imagine a commander recognizing that conventional naval tactics may not provide the best path to victory. Blackbeard's reputation is built partly upon shipboard combat. Matching him directly under expected conditions could be dangerous. Success may require creativity rather than simple force. The battle continues intensifying. Imagine smoke drifting across the water, reducing visibility and complicating communication. Sailors struggle to interpret developments while maintaining discipline. Orders must be shouted above the noise of combat. Every participant experiences uncertainty because no one possesses a complete view of events. History often appears orderly in retrospect. In reality, battles unfold amid confusion. One of the most fascinating aspects of the encounter involves psychology. Imagine the effect of Blackbeard's presence upon opponents. His reputation remains formidable. Many sailors have heard stories about him for years. Now those stories have become reality. Fear is natural, yet fear does not necessarily prevent action. Training, leadership, and necessity all influence behavior. Maynard understands this challenge. Imagine an officer responsible not only for strategy but also for morale. Crew members look to him for confidence. If he appears uncertain, anxiety may spread. If he remains composed, others may find strength. Leadership becomes particularly important during moments when circumstances seem unfavorable. At some point, the engagement begins moving toward close combat. Imagine the distance between vessels shrinking. Cannons remain important, but individual actions become increasingly significant. Muskets, pistols, cutlasses, and physical courage now play larger roles. The battle is transforming from an exchange of artillery into something more personal. Blackbeard thrives in such environments. Imagine a man who has spent years cultivating an image of fearlessness now confronting enemies directly. Contemporary accounts consistently describe him as physically imposing and willing to fight aggressively. Whatever else may be said about him, few observers question his courage. The qualities that helped create the legend remain visible on the battlefield. The pirate captain likely believes victory remains possible. Imagine evaluating conditions through his eyes. He has inflicted damage. He possesses combat experience. His reputation continues intimidating opponents. Many battles are decided by momentum, and momentum can shift rapidly. There is little reason for him to assume defeat is inevitable. Yet appearances can be misleading. Maynard's plan is still unfolding. The naval officer understands that defeating Blackbeard may require drawing him into circumstances favorable to government forces. The battle has reached a critical stage, but the decisive moment has not yet arrived. Smoke continues drifting across the inlet. Weapons continue firing. Men continue struggling for survival. And somewhere within the chaos, events are moving steadily toward the confrontation that will determine the fate of the most famous pirate in the Atlantic. The legend is about to face reality, and reality is often less predictable than legend. As smoke hangs over the waters of Ocracoke Inlet and the battle reaches its most intense phase, the confrontation between Blackbeard and Lieutenant Robert Maynard moves beyond strategy and into the realm of direct human conflict. Plans, preparations, and reputations have brought both men to this point. Now outcomes will depend upon decisions made in seconds rather than months. The Atlantic world has spent years discussing Blackbeard as a symbol of piracy. Yet symbols eventually become flesh and blood again when confronted with immediate danger. The final moments of Blackbeard's life will unfold not through distant political calculations, but through close combat aboard a ship surrounded by chaos. Imagine Maynard assessing the situation carefully. The opening phase of the battle has been costly. Casualties have occurred. Blackbeard's firepower has demonstrated its effectiveness. Yet the lieutenant remains committed to his plan. Historical accounts suggest that he orders many of his men below deck, creating the impression that government forces have suffered heavier losses than they actually have. The tactic is risky. Success depends upon convincing Blackbeard that victory is within reach. Now imagine the scene from Blackbeard's perspective. Through drifting smoke and confusion, enemy resistance appears weakened. The opportunity seems clear. If the opposing vessel can be boarded successfully, the battle may end quickly. Years of pirate experience encourage aggressive action under such circumstances. Boarding actions have decided many maritime confrontations. Blackbeard chooses to press the attack. The pirate and his men move toward Maynard's vessel. Imagine the moment they cross from one ship to another. The noise of battle remains overwhelming. Weapons are ready. Adrenaline surges through everyone involved. Close combat differs fundamentally from long-range exchanges. Distances shrink. Individual skill becomes more important. Decisions occur rapidly. Survival depends upon awareness, courage, and luck. Then the trap is sprung. Imagine hidden sailors suddenly emerging from below deck. What appeared to be a weakened crew reveals unexpected strength. The battle transforms instantly. Blackbeard and his men find themselves confronting more resistance than anticipated. Surprise changes momentum. The carefully prepared tactic begins producing results. The deck becomes a scene of intense fighting. Imagine smoke, shouting, and movement everywhere. Muskets fire at close range. Pistols discharge. Cutlasses clash. Men struggle for footing amid debris and confusion. The realities of 18th century combat are harsh and personal. There is little distance between opponents. Every encounter carries immediate consequences. At the center of this struggle stand Blackbeard and Maynard. Imagine two men whose lives have followed dramatically different paths now confronting one another directly. One is a famous pirate whose name has become legend. The other is a relatively young naval officer determined to end that legend. Their meeting represents more than a personal conflict. It symbolizes the broader struggle between piracy and authority during the closing years of the golden age of piracy. Historical accounts describe fierce fighting between them. Imagine Blackbeard moving through the chaos with the confidence that characterized his career. Contemporary reports suggest that he sustains multiple injuries yet continues fighting. Such details contribute significantly to his enduring legend. Whether viewed as hero, villain, or something more complicated, he demonstrates extraordinary determination during the battle's final moments. Maynard proves equally determined. Imagine the pressure resting upon him. Failure could allow Blackbeard to escape once again. Success would achieve the mission's objective and establish his reputation permanently. Retreat is not an attractive option. Commitment becomes essential. The duel between the two men unfolds amid surrounding violence. Imagine weapons clashing repeatedly while sailors fight around them. Every participant understands, consciously or unconsciously, that the outcome may depend upon these central figures. Leadership matters greatly in combat because morale often follows visible examples. Blackbeard's injuries accumulate. Imagine the physical toll of sustained fighting. Even the most experienced and courageous individuals possess limits. Human bodies can endure remarkable hardship, but not indefinitely. The pirate captain who once seemed larger than life remains subject to the same realities affecting everyone else. According to historical accounts, Blackbeard eventually suffers multiple gunshot wounds and numerous cuts before falling. Imagine the significance of that moment. For years, merchants feared him. Governors discussed him. Sailors told stories about him. His reputation crossed oceans. Now the man himself lies defeated on the deck of a ship in a remote North Carolina inlet. The battle continues briefly, but the outcome is effectively decided. Without their famous leader, remaining resistance collapses. Government forces secure control. The mission that began with political frustration and careful planning has achieved its objective. Yet victory does not end the story. Imagine the aftermath aboard the vessel. Smoke gradually clears. Survivors assess damage and casualties. The immediate danger has passed, but the significance of events is only beginning to emerge. News of Blackbeard's death will spread rapidly through the colonies and beyond. Merchants will celebrate. Officials will claim success. Sailors will begin retelling the story almost immediately. One of the most famous details associated with the aftermath involves Blackbeard's head being removed and displayed as proof of his death. Imagine the symbolism. Governments frequently use such displays to communicate authority and discourage future resistance. The message is clear. Even the most famous pirate can be defeated. Yet history often produces unexpected outcomes. The authorities succeed in killing Blackbeard. They do not succeed in killing the legend. In some ways, the battle ensures his immortality. Had he retired quietly, his story might have faded gradually. Had he disappeared anonymously, historians might remember him only faintly. Instead, he dies dramatically in combat against government forces after years spent building a reputation unlike any other. The ending matches the legend, and because of that, the legend survives. As the sun continues climbing above Ocracoke Inlet and the battle finally comes to an end, the golden age of piracy loses one of its most famous figures. Blackbeard is dead. But Blackbeard the legend is only beginning. Part 9: Legacy of the Pirate King, Myth, Legend, and History. As the smoke from the Battle of Ocracoke drifts away on the coastal winds and the waters of the inlet gradually return to their ordinary rhythms, Blackbeard's life comes to an end. Yet history often treats endings in unexpected ways. Some individuals die and are quickly forgotten. Others achieve a kind of immortality through memory, storytelling, and cultural influence. Edward Teach, the man known to the world as Blackbeard, belongs firmly in the second category. In fact, one of the greatest ironies of his story is that his death contributes significantly to his fame. The battle that ends his life also ensures that future generations will continue discussing him long after the events themselves have passed into history. The pirate captain who spent years cultivating an image of fear leaves behind something even more durable than treasure or ships. He leaves behind a legend. Imagine the Atlantic world in the weeks following news of Blackbeard's death. Merchant ships carry reports between colonies. Newspapers publish accounts of the battle. Government officials share correspondence describing the success of the operation. Sailors gather in taverns to discuss details. Every retelling adds new perspectives. Some emphasize Maynard's courage. Others focus on Blackbeard's resistance. Certain details remain factual. Others begin evolving almost immediately. This process is common throughout history. Human beings rarely preserve stories exactly as they occur. Instead, we reshape them according to memory, emotion, and cultural expectations. Blackbeard is particularly vulnerable to this process because his reputation was already larger than life before his death. Imagine a figure whose appearance, actions, and personality had become the subject of countless stories during his lifetime. People expected dramatic tales involving Blackbeard. Therefore, when news of his death arrives, it naturally becomes part of a larger narrative rather than a simple historical report. One reason the legend grows so rapidly is that Blackbeard's career contains all the elements of a compelling story. Imagine a young sailor rising from obscurity. He enters the world of piracy during a unique historical period. Through intelligence, courage, and theatrical self-presentation, he builds a reputation feared across the Atlantic. He commands powerful ships, challenges colonial authority, and becomes one of the most famous pirates of his age. Finally, he dies in dramatic combat against government forces. The structure resembles a carefully written novel, yet it is grounded in real events. Stories about Blackbeard begin expanding almost immediately. Imagine sailors describing the battle to audiences eager for excitement. Every retelling encourages embellishment. A difficult fight becomes an extraordinary one. Courage becomes fearlessness. Reputation becomes myth. Such transformations are not necessarily deliberate falsehoods. Human memory naturally emphasizes dramatic elements. Over time, stories often become more vivid than the realities that inspired them. The image of Blackbeard himself plays a central role in this process. Imagine the effect his appearance had on contemporaries. The dark beard, the multiple pistols, the slow-burning fuses creating clouds of smoke around his face. These details are visually striking. They remain memorable. Long after specific events fade from memory, powerful images endure. Blackbeard understood this principle during his lifetime, and it continues benefiting his legend after death. Another factor contributing to his enduring fame is the symbolic role he comes to occupy. Imagine the golden age of piracy as a historical era characterized by freedom, danger, ambition, and conflict. Blackbeard gradually becomes one of its most recognizable representatives. When people think about pirates, they increasingly think about him. His individual story merges with broader cultural ideas about piracy itself. The contrast between history and mythology becomes increasingly important. Imagine attempting to separate documented facts from popular stories. Historians rely on official records, eyewitness accounts, letters, and other evidence. Popular culture often relies on dramatic narratives. The two approaches overlap but are not identical. As a result, Blackbeard exists simultaneously as a historical figure and as a legendary character. Many stories associated with him reflect this tension. Imagine tales describing hidden treasure, supernatural events, or extraordinary feats. Some possess little supporting evidence. Others contain elements of truth expanded through repetition. Determining where history ends and mythology begins can be difficult. Yet the challenge itself contributes to fascination. Mysteries encourage curiosity. The broader cultural environment also shapes Blackbeard's legacy. Imagine generations growing up hearing stories about pirates. Adventure literature becomes popular. Maritime history captures public imagination. Authors, artists, and later filmmakers search for compelling subjects. Blackbeard provides everything they need. His appearance is distinctive. His career is dramatic. His ending is memorable. The combination proves irresistible. Interestingly, the qualities that made him effective as a pirate also make him effective as a historical symbol. Imagine someone who understands the value of perception. Blackbeard deliberately crafted an image designed to inspire fear and attention. That image continues functioning long after its creator is gone. Modern audiences recognize him instantly despite living centuries removed from the world he inhabited. Yet behind the legend remains a real person. Imagine Edward Teach before he became Blackbeard. He was a sailor navigating opportunities and risks within a rapidly changing Atlantic world. His choices shaped history, but they emerged from specific circumstances rather than destiny. Remembering this human dimension prevents the legend from becoming detached entirely from reality. As the years become decades and the decades become centuries, Blackbeard's story continues spreading. New audiences encounter it repeatedly. Each generation interprets the pirate differently. Some view him primarily as a criminal. Others see him as a symbol of rebellion or independence. Still others focus on historical context. The legend adapts while remaining recognizable. And perhaps that adaptability explains why Blackbeard survives so successfully in cultural memory. The man is gone. The ships are gone. The world that created him has disappeared. Yet the story remains, sailing forward through history just as surely as any vessel crossing the Atlantic. As the centuries pass and the age of sail gives way to steamships, industrialization, modern navies, and eventually the technological world we know today, Blackbeard's reputation continues evolving in fascinating ways. The Atlantic world that produced him no longer exists. The colonial empires that shaped his career have transformed or vanished. The trade routes he once targeted operate under entirely different conditions. Yet despite these enormous changes, Blackbeard remains one of the most recognizable figures in maritime history. This endurance raises an important question. Why does his story continue capturing attention when so many other historical figures have faded from public memory? Imagine a classroom, museum, library, or documentary audience centuries after Blackbeard's death. People encounter countless historical names during their lives. Most are remembered briefly and then forgotten. Blackbeard is different. His image appears repeatedly in books, films, television programs, video games, artwork, and popular culture. Even individuals with limited knowledge of history often recognize the name. Few pirates achieve such widespread recognition. Part of the answer lies in the balance between reality and imagination. Imagine a historical figure whose life is fully documented and completely understood. Such individuals can be fascinating, but they leave limited room for speculation. Now imagine a figure surrounded by unanswered questions, dramatic events, and larger-than-life stories. Curiosity naturally persists. Blackbeard occupies this space effectively. Historians know a great deal about him, yet enough uncertainty remains to encourage ongoing interest. His connection to piracy also matters. Imagine the role pirates play within cultural imagination. They represent danger, adventure, freedom, lawlessness, and exploration simultaneously. Different audiences emphasize different aspects. Some focus on rebellion against authority. Others focus on maritime adventure. Blackbeard becomes a convenient symbol because his life contains elements supporting multiple interpretations. Modern historians approach him differently than earlier storytellers. Imagine researchers examining archival records, official correspondence, court documents, and contemporary accounts. Their goal is not to create legends, but to understand historical realities. This work has produced a more nuanced picture of Blackbeard. Rather than viewing him solely as a monster or hero, historians increasingly see him as a complex individual operating within specific economic, political, and social circumstances. This perspective reveals something important about the golden age of piracy itself. Imagine piracy not merely as criminal behavior, but as a response to broader historical conditions. Wars create experienced sailors. Economic inequalities create incentives. Weak enforcement creates opportunities. Blackbeard succeeds partly because he understands how to exploit these circumstances. His story, therefore, provides insights into the world around him as well as into his own personality. Archaeology has added another dimension to understanding his legacy. Imagine divers exploring underwater sites associated with pirate activity. The discovery and investigation of remains believed to be connected to the Queen Anne's Revenge have provided valuable information regarding 18th century maritime life. Artifacts recovered from such sites help bridge the gap between legend and reality. They remind us that the famous stories emerged from a tangible historical world. Yet even as evidence accumulates, the legend remains powerful. Imagine audiences encountering Blackbeard through movies, novels, or popular history. Dramatic storytelling continues shaping perceptions. This is not necessarily a problem. Stories play an important role in preserving interest in the past. The challenge lies in distinguishing entertainment from evidence. Both can be valuable when understood appropriately. One reason Blackbeard continues attracting attention is that he embodies a timeless human theme: the relationship between image and power. Imagine an individual who understands that perception can influence outcomes as effectively as physical force. Blackbeard's use of appearance, reputation, and psychological intimidation demonstrates sophisticated awareness of human behavior. Modern audiences recognize these strategies even though the historical context differs dramatically. Another reason involves endings. Imagine two historical figures with equally impressive careers. One retires quietly and disappears from public attention. The other dies dramatically during a climactic confrontation. Which story is more likely to survive? Human beings are drawn to narratives with memorable conclusions. Blackbeard's death at Ocracoke provides exactly that. The battle serves as a natural ending point while reinforcing themes already present throughout his life. His legacy also reflects broader fascination with the sea. Imagine the ocean as a symbol of mystery, opportunity, and uncertainty. Maritime stories often resonate because oceans remain powerful and unpredictable even in modern times. Blackbeard's life unfolds against this backdrop. Ships, storms, distant horizons, and contested waters create settings that continue inspiring imagination. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of his legacy is the coexistence of multiple versions of Blackbeard. Imagine the historical Edward Teach. Imagine the feared pirate captain known to contemporaries. Imagine the legendary figure appearing in popular culture. Each version overlaps with the others while remaining distinct. Together they form a legacy richer and more complex than any single interpretation could provide. As our journey comes to an end and the waters of Ocracoke fade into history once more, Blackbeard remains suspended between fact and legend. He was a real man. He lived during a real historical period. He made choices that affected countless lives. Yet he also became something more. A symbol, a story, a legend that continues sailing through the centuries. The battle that ended his life succeeded in removing a pirate from the Atlantic. It did not remove him from history. If anything, it secured his place within it. And so, long after the cannons fell silent and the ships disappeared beyond the horizon, Blackbeard continues his voyage, not across oceans, but across time itself, carried forward by memory, curiosity, and the enduring power of a remarkable story. And so, our voyage through the life and final journey of Blackbeard comes to an end. Tonight, we've sailed back into the early 18th century, into a world shaped by wind, wooden ships, distant horizons, and the constant struggle between freedom and authority. We've followed the rise of a young sailor named Edward Teach, watched him transform himself into the feared pirate known as Blackbeard, and witnessed how reputation, intelligence, and carefully crafted fear helped him become one of the most famous figures of the golden age of piracy. We've stood aboard the mighty Queen Anne's Revenge as she crossed the waters of the Atlantic. We've watched Blackbeard challenge merchant ships, build a legend that spread from port to port, and reach a level of fame that few pirates in history would ever equal. We've followed him to Charleston at the height of his power, We've explored the quiet waters of North Carolina, where the first signs of change began to appear, and we've witnessed the dramatic events at Ocracoke Inlet, where years of piracy, politics, and ambition finally converged in a battle that would bring an end to his reign. Yet, as we've discovered tonight, the death of Blackbeard did not end the story. In many ways, it was only the beginning. The man disappeared into history. The legend remained. More than 300 years later, his name still echoes through books, museums, documentaries, and stories told around the world. Whether remembered as a criminal, a strategist, a symbol of rebellion, or simply one of history's most fascinating pirates, Blackbeard continues to capture our imagination. His ships are gone. His crew is gone. The world that created him has vanished. But the story survives. And perhaps that is the greatest treasure he left behind. Not gold, not silver, not hidden riches buried on distant islands, but a story powerful enough to endure across centuries. If you enjoyed this relaxing journey through pirate history and would like to explore more forgotten voyages, legendary figures, lost civilizations, maritime mysteries, ancient empires, and remarkable stories from the past, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating long-form history for sleep adventures designed to transport you gently into another time and place. There are still countless stories waiting beyond the horizon. More ships to follow, more mysteries to uncover, and more journeys through history yet to begin. For now, allow the sound of the waves to grow distant. Let the sails disappear into the evening mist. And imagine Blackbeard's final ship slowly fading beyond the horizon, leaving only the endless Atlantic and the memory of a legend behind. Thank you for joining me on this voyage. Good night, sleep well, and may calm seas and favorable winds carry you peacefully into your dreams.